The brutal truth about men who can't control themselves. You see him everywhere, the man who says he'll start tomorrow, but wakes up repeating yesterday, the one who blames his circumstances while creating them with every impulsive decision, the guy who swears he's about to turn it around while scrolling through his third hour of digital anesthesia. He's not evil, he's not stupid, he's not even necessarily lazy, he's just fundamentally ungoverned. No internal structure, no delayed gratification, no gap between wanting and taking, and the world is eating him alive because of it. But here's what nobody wants to admit. That man isn't some separate category of human. That man is every man who hasn't done the brutal work of building self-command. The only difference between the man who's in control and the man who isn't is one series of choices, repeated until they became character, until discipline became default, until restraint became reflex. The undisciplined man thinks he's free because he does whatever he feels like doing, but he's the least free person in any room. He's a slave to every urge, every craving, every dopamine trap. He's controlled by his appetites, his moods, his immediate discomfort. He's not living, he's reacting, surviving, being swept downstream while calling it choice. If you recognize even a shadow of this in yourself, don't look away, because the gap between who you are and who you could be is measured entirely in self-control, and every day you delay building it is a day you remain a hostage to your own impulses. Consider subscribing for the part of you that's tired of being controlled by the weakest version of yourself. Context: the cost of being ungoverned. Let's be clear about what we're actually talking about here. This isn't about perfection. It's not about never making mistakes or never indulging. It's about the man who fundamentally cannot delay gratification, who cannot sit with discomfort without immediately medicating it, who cannot hold a commitment when it conflicts with what he feels like doing in the moment. You know this man. Maybe you are this man. He's the one who says he's going to train but hits snooze 6 times. He's the one who's going to quit the vice but finds himself elbow deep in it. By Thursday, he's the one who swears he'll save money, but somehow every paycheck evaporates into purchases he can't even remember making. He's the one who knows what he should do, agrees it would improve his life, and then doesn't do it over and over and over. And the worst part, he's confused about why his life isn't changing. He genuinely doesn't see the connection between his inability to govern his impulses and the chaos in his outcomes. He thinks he's unlucky, or the system's rigged, or people don't give him a fair shot. But the truth is simpler and more brutal. He's unreliable to his own commitments. And when you can't trust yourself to follow through on what you said mattered, nobody else can trust you. Either employers sense it, partners feel it, opportunities avoid it, because ungoverned men are liabilities waiting to manifest. They talk a good game but collapse under the slightest pressure or temptation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But the ungoverned man has reversed this entirely. He's given his mind over to outside events, to triggers, to cravings, to whatever stimulus happens to be loudest. He's abdicated the throne of his own consciousness, and now he's surprised that his kingdom is in chaos. Here's what lack of self-control actually costs: time. Endless cycles of starting over, cleaning up messes, recovering from impulsive decisions, trust, both from others and, more devastatingly, from yourself. Opportunities, the ones that require consistency, that reward discipline, that only come to people who can be counted on. Relationships, because emotional volatility and broken promises compound until people stop investing. Health, because bodies abused by impulsive eating, drinking, staying up, avoiding movement eventually break down. Peace, because you can't have inner calm when you're constantly at war with your own declared intentions. This isn't abstract philosophy. This is the daily lived reality of men who haven't built internal governance. They're bleeding opportunities, hemorrhaging respect, losing ground to men who aren't smarter or more talented, just more disciplined. And the thing that makes this particularly brutal is that deep down, the ungoverned man knows. He knows when he's lying to himself. He knows when he's choosing comfort over commitment. He knows the difference between a genuine reason and a convenient excuse, but he does it anyway because in that moment, the discomfort of discipline feels worse than the long-term cost of indiscipline. And that calculation, that trade of future stability for immediate relief, that's what keeps him stuck. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's the core of it. The ungoverned man isn't free no matter how much he talks about doing what he wants. He's enslaved to his appetites, his moods, his conditioning, his fears. True freedom only exists on the other side of self-mastery. And self-mastery only comes through the repeated, uncomfortable practice of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. The man who can't control himself isn't just missing out on achievement. He's missing out on the fundamental experience of being sovereign in his own life, of knowing that when he commits to something it happens, of trusting himself the way you'd trust your most reliable friend, of moving through the world with the quiet confidence that comes from internal order. That's what's at stake here, not just success, but selfhood, not just results, but respect. From the world, yes, but more importantly from the person looking back at you in the mirror. Law 1. Impulse slavery masquerades as freedom. The first and most dangerous lie the ungoverned man tells himself: I do what I want, I'm not controlled by anyone. Let's break down how deeply backwards this is. The man who does whatever he feels like in the moment isn't free. He's the most controlled person imaginable. He's just controlled by his lower impulses instead of by conscious choice. Think about it. If you can't say no to the craving, the urge, the immediate desire, then you're not in control. The craving is, if you can't delay gratification, even when you know it would serve you better, then you're not making choices. You're being puppeted by dopamine circuits. If every uncomfortable emotion immediately triggers an escape behavior, scrolling, eating, drinking, buying, watching, then you're not living your life. You're running a pre-programmed script written by your past conditioning. Real freedom is the ability to feel an impulse and choose whether to follow it, to want something and decide it doesn't serve you right now, to be uncomfortable and sit with it anyway, because you're building something bigger than momentary relief. But the ungoverned man can't do this. The gap between impulse and action is non-existent. He feels, he acts like a machine, like an animal operating purely on stimulus response. There's no consciousness in between, no pause, no evaluation, just want, take, uncomfortable, escape, triggered, react. And he calls this freedom, but watch what happens when you challenge it. Tell him he can't have something for a week, just 1 week. Prove you can delay, watch him squirm, make excuses, get defensive, ultimately fail because he can't, because he's not free, because the substance or behavior or habit owns him. He's just been calling his slavery freedom for so long, he believes his own story. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The ungoverned man is living this exactly. His unconscious impulses are directing everything, and he's interpreting their commands as his own desires, his own choices, his own free will. But they're not. Their conditioned responses, dopamine-seeking behavior, childhood coping mechanisms that never got updated. And until he sees that, until he gets brutally honest about what's actually driving his decisions, he'll remain enslaved while thinking he's liberated. Here's the test. Can you not do something you habitually do? Can you fast when you're used to eating? Can you sit in silence when you're used to constant stimulation? Can you be alone with your thoughts when you're used to drowning them in content? If the answer is no, you're not free. You're dependent. and dependency is just slavery with better marketing. The Stoics understood this deeply. They practiced voluntary discomfort not because they hated pleasure, but because they knew that the man who can't go without pleasure is controlled by it. They practiced poverty, hunger, cold, rejection, not as punishment, but as training to be free from needing comfort, training to choose their response regardless of the stimulus. That's what self-control actually is, the ability to feel something and not be governed by it, to want something and not need it, to be uncomfortable and not immediately medicate it. And the man who has this ability, he's actually free. He can enjoy pleasure without being enslaved by it. He can feel pain without being destroyed by it. He can want things without being desperate for them. But the man who lacks it is trapped in an endless cycle: discomfort, escape, temporary relief, inevitable return of discomfort, escape again. He's a hamster on a wheel, just with more sophisticated distractions, and the wheel never stops because he never addresses the core issue, his inability to tolerate discomfort. So he scrolls to avoid anxiety, but the anxiety returns. He drinks to numb pain, but the pain returns. He buys to feel successful, but the emptiness returns. He watches to escape boredom, but the boredom returns. Nothing gets resolved because he's not building capacity for discomfort. He's just managing it with increasingly ineffective anesthetics. And over time, this creates a life of quiet desperation, not dramatic suffering, just a low-grade sense of being stuck, of knowing you could be more, but somehow you keep choosing less, of watching years pass while you repeat the same patterns of promising yourself, "This time will be different." But waking up in the same prison, that's impulse slavery. And it masquerades as freedom right up until you try to change something. Then you discover how little control you actually have. Law 2. Your appetites don't respect weakness. 13:30. Here's something nobody tells you about impulses. They're not static. They don't stay the same strength regardless of how you respond to them. They learn, and they get stronger when you feed them, weaker when you starve them. The second law: every time you give in to an impulse, you're training it to demand more. Think of your appetites like a dog you're training. If every time it begs, you feed it, what happens? It begs louder, more frequently, more aggressively, because you've taught it that begging works. Your impulses operate the exact same way every time you give in to the craving, the scroll, the snack, the purchase, the escape. You're reinforcing the neural pathway that says, "This is how we solve discomfort." And that pathway gets stronger, faster, harder to resist. Meanwhile, the pathway for discipline, for delay, for sitting with discomfort, that one atrophies from lack of use. So the ungoverned man doesn't just stay at the same level of lack of control, he gets progressively worse. What started as, "I'll just check my phone real quick," becomes checking it 150 times a day. What started as one drink to unwind becomes can't function without it dependency. What started as "I'll start my diet tomorrow" becomes years of tomorrow never comes, because appetites don't respect weakness. They exploit it, they push, they demand, they escalate, and the man who keeps giving in keeps teaching them they're in charge. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." The trial is always the same. Will you feed the impulse or will you starve it? And every single time you starve it, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Every time you feed it, you're voting for who you've been. Your identity isn't some fixed thing. It's the sum total of these micro decisions repeated until they become patterns, patterns repeated until they become character, and character is what determines your destiny. The ungoverned man keeps voting for immediate relief and then wonders why his character never changes, why he's still the same person with the same problems year after year. But he's literally sculpting that person with every impulse he indulges. He's teaching his nervous system, we are the kind of person who can't delay gratification. And the nervous system believes him and makes it true. Here's what this looks like in practice. The man who can't stop scrolling isn't just wasting time in the moment he's training his brain. That focus is optional. That boredom is an emergency. That entertainment is a right, and over time, his capacity for deep work, for sustained attention, for creative problem-solving, it atrophies. The man who can't skip the late-night food isn't just consuming extra calories. He's training his body. That hunger signals must be immediately satisfied, that discipline is negotiable, that comfort trumps commitment, and over time his metabolic health, his self-trust, his ability to honor his own word. It degrades the man who can't sit with difficult emotions without reaching for his vice of choice, isn't just avoiding pain in the moment he's training his psyche. That discomfort is dangerous, that feelings are emergencies, that escape is the only option. And over time, his emotional resilience, his capacity for genuine relationship, his ability to process anything difficult, it weakens. This is the compound effect of ungoverned impulses. They don't just cost you in the moment. They reshape you. They make you into a person who is progressively less capable of the very things you claim to want, because while you're busy pursuing comfort, your appetites are busy remaking you in their image, and their image is weak, reactive, governed by the lowest common denominator of human experience. The path out exists, but it's the opposite of what the ungoverned man wants to hear. You have to start saying no, not sometimes, not when it's convenient, not when you feel motivated, but as a practice, as a discipline, as a way of life. You have to create friction between impulse and action. You have to build the gap that doesn't currently exist. And yes, it's uncomfortable. That's the point. The discomfort is the training ground where self-control is built. There's no other way. You can't think your way to discipline. You can't understand your way there. You can't wait until you feel ready. You have to practice it in the moment when every cell in your body is screaming for relief. When you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're hungry, when you're lonely. Those are the reps that matter. Those are the moments where you're either feeding the beast or starving it. And the man who consistently starves it discovers something incredible. It gets quieter. The cravings reduce in intensity and frequency. The discipline gets easier because he's built the muscle. The confidence grows because he's proven to himself he can do hard things. And slowly he transforms from someone controlled by his appetites into someone who has appetites but isn't controlled by them. That's the difference between slavery and sovereignty, and it's built one uncomfortable no at a time. Law 3. Emotional children in grown bodies. Let's talk about what the ungoverned man really is underneath all the rationalizations. He's a child in an adult body, emotionally frozen at the developmental stage where he never learned to self-soothe, the third law. Men who can't control themselves are still running toddler-level emotional regulation strategies, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a diagnosis, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Watch a toddler when they don't get what they want. Immediately they melt down, they tantrum. They can't modulate their response to the magnitude of the disappointment. A cookie delayed feels like an existential crisis. Discomfort of any kind demands immediate attention and resolution, and they have no internal capacity to soothe themselves. They need external regulation. They need someone to calm them, distract them, fix the problem. Now, watch the ungoverned adult man. He can't get what he wants immediately. He gets irritable, dysregulated, emotionally volatile. He has to wait. He scrolls, he snaps at people, he finds some way to discharge the discomfort he experiences, any negative emotion. He immediately reaches for his pacifier, food, phone, substance, sex, shopping. He has no more internal capacity for self-regulation than the toddler. He's just better at hiding it and has access to more sophisticated distractions. But developmentally, he's stuck. He never learned that feelings pass. That discomfort isn't dangerous, that you can sit with anxiety without dying from it. He never built the neural circuitry for delayed gratification, never developed the psychological musculature for emotional tolerance, and so he goes through life emotionally fragile, unable to handle stress without medicating it, unable to sit with uncertainty without creating false certainty through impulsive action, unable to tolerate any gap between desire and fulfillment. This is why ungoverned men are so exhausting to be around. They're high maintenance emotionally. They need constant management, constant reassurance, constant environmental adjustment to keep them stable because they have no internal stability. They're entirely dependent on external conditions being just right. And when conditions aren't right, which is most of the time in adult life, they fall apart. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But the ungoverned man can't control his reactions. He's purely reactive. No gap between stimulus and response. Someone criticizes him. Instant defensiveness. No pause to consider if there's truth in it. Something doesn't go his way. Immediate frustration. No capacity to adapt. He has to wait for something. Agitation, fidgeting, finding something else to grab onto. It's all automatic, all unconscious, all driven by an inability to self-regulate. And here's the brutal part. This arrested development affects everything. Relationships. He can't handle conflict because it's uncomfortable, so he avoids it until things explode. He can't handle his partner having needs. He can't immediately meet, so he gets defensive or dismissive. He can't handle his own difficult feelings, so he definitely can't hold space for someone else's. Career. He can't handle delayed rewards, so he quits when results aren't immediate. He can't handle criticism from a boss, so he changes jobs or blames others instead of improving. He can't handle the boredom of mastery-level work, so he stays perpetually amateur. Health. He can't handle the discomfort of training, so he avoids it. He can't handle the temporary dissatisfaction of eating well, so he doesn't. He can't handle being sore, tired, or challenged physically, so he quits before adaptation happens. Finances. He can't delay purchases, so he's always broke or in debt. He can't handle not having the thing everyone else has, so he finances his ego. He can't tolerate the anxiety of not spending when he's stressed, so shopping becomes emotional regulation across every domain. The same pattern. Emotional intolerance leading to impulsive behavior, leading to worse outcomes, and the cycle continues because he never addresses the core issue. The core issue isn't the specific behavior, the drinking, the scrolling, the spending, whatever those are symptoms, the core issue is. He never learned to be uncomfortable and be okay. He never developed what psychologists call distress tolerance, the capacity to experience negative emotions without immediately acting to eliminate them. And until he develops that capacity, he'll keep cycling through different versions of the same pattern. The substance might change. The specific behavior might shift. But the underlying dynamic, discomfort, immediate escape, remains constant. Here's what growing up emotionally actually requires. Learning to swat with feelings, without acting on them. Being angry and not lashing out. Being anxious and not seeking immediate relief. Being sad and not numbing it. Just feeling it, breathing through it, letting it pass, because feelings always pass if you don't feed them with rumination or resistance. Learning that you can want something and not need it. That desire isn't a command, it's just a sensation that you can observe the wanting without being controlled by it. That no to yourself is a complete sentence. Learning that discomfort is information, not emergency. It's feedback from your system, not a crisis requiring intervention. Sometimes it's telling you something needs to change, but often it's just the normal friction of growth, of discipline, of being alive, and you can acknowledge it without being ruled by it. Learning that your feelings aren't facts. Feeling like a failure doesn't make you feeling overwhelmed, doesn't mean you can't handle it. Feeling like you need something doesn't mean you actually do. The ungoverned man believes every feeling is gospel truth, requiring immediate response. The governed man knows feelings are weather, they change, they pass, they're not the whole story. This developmental work is hard. It's harder than anything the ungoverned man's currently doing, but it's the only thing that actually changes the pattern, because until you can self-soothe, until you can emotionally regulate without external pacifiers, you'll remain dependent, fragile, controlled by your moods, and no amount of success, money, or achievement can fix that because it's not an external problem, it's an internal development issue. The good news? It's learnable. You weren't born knowing how to do this. You failed to learn it at the developmental stage when most people do, but adults can still develop emotional maturity. It just requires intentionality, practice, and willingness to be uncomfortable while you build the capacity. And every time you sit with discomfort without escaping it, every time you feel the craving and don't feed it, every time you ride out the anxiety instead of medicating it, you're quite literally building new neural pathways. You're developing the psychological infrastructure you should have built at 7 but didn't. And gradually, you stop being a child in a grown body and start being an adult who can actually handle adult life. Law 4. The Betrayal Compound, 18-22-30. Here's what eventually destroys the ungoverned man, even if everything else doesn't. The accumulating weight of self-betrayal. The fourth law, every broken promise to yourself erodes the foundation of your identity. When you tell yourself you're going to do something and then don't do it, when you commit to a change and then abandon it when it gets hard, when you know what you should do, and consciously choose the easier wrong, you're not just failing at a task. You're teaching yourself a devastating lesson. My word means nothing, even to me. And once that lesson sinks in, once you've internalized that you can't trust yourself, everything starts to collapse, because self-trust is the foundation of everything else. It's what allows you to set goals. If you can't trust yourself to follow through, why bother setting them? It's what enables confidence. If you know you'll quit when things get hard, how can you feel confident facing challenges? It's what creates self-respect. If you constantly betray your own commitments, how can you respect yourself? The ungoverned man has usually shattered his self-trust completely. He's broken so many promises to himself that he doesn't even believe his own declarations anymore. "I'm going to start Monday" is a joke. He knows it. Somewhere deep inside, "this time is different" is a lie, and he's the one telling it. "I'm serious now" has no weight, because he said it 50 times before and failed 50 times, and this creates a psychological hell that most people don't talk about. You become someone you don't believe in. You know your own patterns. You know your own weaknesses. You know how this story ends, and yet you keep playing it out. Keep lying to yourself. Keep pretending this time will be different without changing anything fundamental. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present," but he also wrote about keeping your commitments, about being true to your nature, about discipline, because the present moment includes following through on what past you committed to and when you don't. When you consistently betray that trust, you create a fractured self. Past you making promises, present you breaking them, future you inheriting the consequences, and none of those selves trust each other anymore. This fracture shows up in subtle ways. You stop setting ambitious goals because you know you won't achieve them. You sabotage opportunities before they can expose your lack of follow-through. You avoid situations where you'd have to. Demonstrate discipline because you know you don't have it. You become defensive when people count on you because deep down you know you're unreliable, and you resent successful people not because they have something you don't, but because they demonstrate a quality you've given up on in yourself: the ability to honor their own commitments. Here's the compounding effect nobody warns you about. The first time you break a commitment to yourself, it's relatively easy to forgive. "I'll do better next time. I was tired. It's not a big deal." The 10th time, it's harder, but you still manage to rationalize it the 100th time. You've built an identity around being unreliable to yourself, and now it's not just a behavior pattern, it's who you are. You're the kind of person who doesn't follow through. You're the kind of person who starts things but doesn't finish them. You're the kind of person who has potential but never actualizes it. And that identity becomes self-fulfilling. Because humans have a deep drive for consistency with their self-concept. If you believe you're the kind of person who quits, you'll find ways to quit. Even when you're close to succeeding, if you believe you can't be trusted, you'll sabotage trust. Even when people are trying to believe in you, if you believe you're weak-willed, you'll fulfill that prophecy every time discipline is required. The betrayal compounds until it becomes the lens through which you see yourself. And once that happens, change becomes exponentially harder because you're not just fighting the behavior, you're fighting an identity. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. But the reverse is equally true. Mediocrity is not an accident, but a habit. Weakness is not bad luck, but a pattern. And unreliability is not a temporary state, but a practiced identity. The ungoverned man has practiced being ungoverned for so long it's become who he is, not just what he does, but who he is, and the only way out is to start small. So small it's almost embarrassing, not, "I'm going to transform my entire life starting Monday." That's the same grandiose promise you've broken 100 times. Instead, "I'm going to make my bed for 7 consecutive days." That's it. One tiny commitment you can actually keep, and then you keep it, not perfectly, not with style, just keep it. 7 days of making the bed no matter what. And when you do, something shifts. You've proven to yourself that your word can mean something. You've rebuilt a tiny fragment of self-trust. And then you add another small commitment and another, and over time, months, years, you rebuild the foundation. You prove to yourself through accumulated evidence that you can be trusted, that when you commit to something, it happens not because you're motivated, not because it's convenient, but because you said you would, and that means something. This is the path out of the betrayal compound. Microscopic commitments kept consistently, building evidence against the old identity. You can't think your way out of this. You can't understand your way there. You can't wait until you feel ready. You have to do the smallest possible thing that demonstrates follow-through, and do it again tomorrow and the next day. And slowly, painfully, honestly, you become someone whose word means something, first to yourself and eventually to others. Law 5. The governed man's advantage. Let's end by talking about what's possible on the other side, because this isn't just about avoiding the costs of being ungoverned, it's about accessing the advantages that only come to men who've built internal command. The 5th law, self-control, is the multiplier on every other ability. Think about 2 men with identical talent, identical intelligence, identical opportunities, but one has self-discipline and one doesn't. Over time, the gap between them becomes a chasm because talent without discipline is just potential that dies unrealized. Intelligence without discipline is just clever rationalization for poor choices. Opportunities without discipline are just chances to fail. Publicly discipline is what takes any other quality you have and makes it actually useful. It's the difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it, between having a plan and executing the plan, between saying you care about something and proving it through consistent action, and the advantages compound. Compound. 1. You become reliable. And reliability is the scarcest commodity in modern life. Most people are flaky, most people overpromise and underdeliver, most people are governed by their moods. So when you show up consistently, when your word actually means something, when people can count on you, you stand out. Massively, opportunities start finding you because people know you'll actually follow through. Relationships deepen because people trust you to do what you say. Respect accumulates because you've earned it through demonstrated character. Compound 2. You build momentum. The ungoverned man is always starting over, always resetting, always at day one, always explaining why this time will be different. But the governed man stacks days, day 100 of training hits, different than day 1 year 3 of the business has momentum. Year doesn't. Decade 2 of the marriage has depth. Decade 1 is still building consistency over time, creates a force multiplier that the perpetual restarter never experiences. Compound 3. You develop trust in yourself. And this might be the most valuable one when you know, not hope, not wish, but know, that if you commit to something, you'll do it. Your relationship with goal setting changes entirely. You stop setting goals you don't believe in. You stop making promises you won't keep. You become honest with yourself about what you actually will do versus what sounds good. And paradoxically, this makes you more ambitious, not less, because you trust yourself to handle the difficulty. You've proven through repeated action that you can do hard things. So you start attempting harder things. The governed man looks at a difficult challenge and thinks, "This will be hard, but I've done hard things before." The ungoverned man looks at the same challenge and thinks, "This will be hard, so I probably won't finish it." That difference in self-trust determines which mountains you even attempt to climb. Compound for 4. You access flow states. You know what you need to access: deep work, creative flow, optimal performance, the ability to sustain focused attention without constantly seeking relief from discomfort, the ability to push through the frustrating middle parts of any challenging task, the ability to delay gratification long enough to complete something meaningful. All of that is self-control. The ungoverned man never experiences this because his attention is fractured. He's checking his phone, he's snacking, he's switching tasks every time focus gets difficult. He lives in the shallows forever, but the governed man can go deep, can sustain attention for hours, can push through frustration into breakthrough, can create work that actually matters, instead of just consuming what others create. Compound 5. You become dangerous. And I mean that in the best sense. You become dangerous to complacency, to mediocrity, to the forces that want you small, because you've developed the ability to suffer for what you want, to delay gratification, to endure discomfort, to keep going when everyone else quits. That makes you formidable, not in a flashy way, not in a way that announces itself, but in the quiet way that changes everything. The man with self-control becomes someone you can't stop through normal means. You can't distract him because he's trained his attention. You can't discourage him because he's used to being uncomfortable. You can't wear him down because he's built for endurance. You can't tempt him off his path because he's learned to say no to what doesn't serve his vision. That's power, real power, not the performance of it. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That's not motivational fluff. That's observable reality. The man who governs himself governs his outcomes. The man who can't govern himself is governed by everything else. And in a world of ungoverned men being swept wherever their impulses take them, the governed man moves with intention, builds with consistency, achieves through accumulated discipline. He's not lucky. He's just playing a different game. He's not gifted. He's just stayed in the arena long enough for skill to compound. He's not special. He's just made himself reliable to his own commitments, and over time, that creates a life that looks like success from the outside but feels like integrity from the inside, because there's alignment between who you say you are and what you actually do, between your values and your actions, between your intentions and your outcomes. And that alignment, that's what the ungoverned man is missing and doesn't even know it. Integration, the choice, 27 run 29:30. So here's where we land. You've seen the cost of being ungoverned. Slavery disguised as freedom, appetites that grow stronger with feeding, Emotional childhood in an adult body, compounding self-betrayal, perpetual restarter status. And you've seen the alternative: reliability, momentum, self-trust, flow states, formidable capability. The question isn't whether you understand this intellectually. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because understanding changes nothing. You can agree with everything in this video and still be ungoverned tomorrow. You can feel motivated right now and still choose comfort over commitment. When it matters, knowing the path and walking the path are completely different things, and the brutal truth is this: most men will understand and do nothing. They'll recognize themselves in the descriptions. They'll feel the sting of self-recognition. They'll maybe even commit to changing, and by next week they'll be running the same patterns they've always run, because intellectual understanding doesn't rewire neural pathways. Emotional resonance doesn't build discipline. Even genuine desire to change doesn't create change without action. The only thing that changes you is repeated choice in the direction of discipline when you don't feel like it. When it's hard, when nobody's watching, when you could easily give yourself a pass. That's where change happens. In those unglamorous moments of choosing the harder right. And it's not dramatic, it's not a movie montage. It's just you alone making one choice, then another, getting it right sometimes, failing sometimes, getting back up and trying again. No fireworks, no applause, just the slow accumulation of evidence that you're becoming governable. Here's what I want you to understand. You're not broken. You're not fundamentally flawed. You're not lacking some special ingredient that disciplined people have. You just haven't built the skill yet. Self-control is a skill. It's not a personality trait you're born with or without. It's developed through practice, strengthened through use, atrophied through neglect. And right now, if you're ungoverned, you've just practiced being ungoverned more than you've practiced discipline. That's it. That's the only difference, which means you can start practicing differently. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, not when you feel ready right now. With the next decision you make, the next impulse you feel, you can create a gap between feeling it and acting on it. The next commitment you make, you can honor it even when you don't feel like it. The next moment of discomfort, you can sit with it instead of immediately escaping it just once, and then again and again, and over time those moments add up. They become patterns. Patterns become character. Character becomes destiny. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Stop arguing with yourself about whether you're capable of discipline. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to start. Stop preparing to prepare. Just be governed right now with the next choice. Make your bed, not because it matters in the grand scheme, but because you said you would skip the scroll. Not because it's evil, but because you're training your attention. Sit with the discomfort, not because you enjoy it, but because you're building capacity. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. You're either becoming more governed or more ungoverned. There's no neutral ground. Every choice is a vote for one or the other. Call to reflect. 29:30 to 30:30. Here's your challenge, not for motivation, but for honest self-assessment. Identify one area where you're currently ungoverned, one impulse you can't seem to delay, one commitment you keep breaking, one behavior you can't control, just one. Be specific, and for the next 7 days, practice governance in that one area, not perfectly, not with style. Just practice if it's the phone. Create a delay between impulse to check and actually checking if it's food. Sit with hunger for 10 minutes before eating if it's the snooze button. Get up when the alarm goes if it's the evening vice. Delay it by 1 hour from your normal time. Just create friction. Just build the gap. Just prove to yourself you can delay what you usually can't, and notice what happens. Notice how the impulse feels when you don't immediately obey it. Notice what you discover about yourself in the gap between want, and take notice whether you're actually unable to control yourself or whether you've just never seriously tried. Because most men discover it's the latter. They've told themselves they can't. For so long they believed it, but they've never actually tested it with genuine commitment, so test it. 7 days, one area, honest effort, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove to yourself that you're not as ungoverned as you think, that change is possible, that you can be trusted starting now. The quiet work you do in these moments is building the kind of strength nobody sees, but everyone feels. Stay focused, stay grounded, and remember, every man who seems naturally disciplined just practiced being ungoverned less than you have. That's the only difference, and that difference can change, starting with the next choice you make.